DIY car guys, and welcome back. What do we have today? Well, we have the 400 right here. Hopefully I can get it in this weekend, but before it goes in, we have to put the intake on. In the past, I have just bolt the intakes on, throw it in there. I haven't showed you guys my process that I do to put the intake on there, make sure the gaskets and all that stuff match up to the ports, put the RTV in the China wall so it doesn't leak. I've never shown you guys that, so today we're talking about just that. So, if you guys in the past have watched my videos, you know that I ported these AFR 210 heads slightly larger to match up to the Super Vic intake over here. Yes, they both call for a 1206 intake gasket, but once you straighten out the ports and get all those lumps in there nice and smooth, it is actually a little bit bigger than a 1206 intake gasket. So the heads are slightly bigger on 1206. And so was the intake, so I had to port the 1206 intake gaskets to match. So I don't know how these are going to match up, but I ordered some 1207 intake gaskets. So you guys are going to see, just like me today, will the 1207s work for my slightly ported heads? I don't know, maybe they won't work. I'll have to go back to the 1206s and port them. Okay, so right now I just taped them up, and you can see they're definitely larger, more larger in the size than the top and the bottom. So I am going to take off just a tiny bit of gasket on the bottom and top, but I do think that's going to work. And you can see right here, you can only go so high for these guys to line up because at a certain point, your bolts not allow you to go up, which is fine because I know if I just push that gasket up on the bottom of the bolt when it's bolted up, you can let all the RTV on both sides kind of firm up a little bit, wait a while, then till tomorrow, torque it down, and that way this gasket won't slide up and down like that once you use RTV to seal it up initially. I know there's one guy saying you don't want to use that, you want to use this heavy grease. I don't do that. It never works out well for me that way when I'm doing stuff like this. So that's why I use RTV, something that'll hold the gaskets up, because if not, it's going to be a very bad day trying to get these to seat up correctly. So what I'm going to do now is pop the intake on there, and we'll look down the ports and we'll see just how well it's lining up. I know on the sides, I'm not too worried about right here that it's larger than a port, because I'm pretty sure that on the sides, on this guy right here, they matched up pretty well to the head. So let's go ahead and check that out, and then I'll make my decision if I'm going to use these after that guy is on there, and we can have a little better look at how the ports are lining up. All right, I think it's pretty much where it needs to be, except for right here. Well, I'm not super stoked at the gap on the sides, honestly. I think I'm gonna have to run up, hopefully they have a 1206 in town somewhere. So it looks like I'm going back to the 1206 because I'm not sure how much that gap, I mean, like the edges, I'll get my phone, I'll show you. I mean, the port from the intake down to the head, the aluminum's pretty close, but that gap in there, I'm not super stoked. So yeah, I think I'm going back to 1206. Dang it. It's kind of a pain in the butt to slowly port those out, but that's what I'm gonna do. Okay, so I went around a couple AutoZones and I couldn't find any 1206 gaskets in stock in town, but they can have me one here tomorrow around 11 o'clock. Of course, I'm working tomorrow at 11 o'clock, so when I get off work, we will, we will port that gasket, and then we will put the intake back on the 400, and we will fill this hole with a motor. We'll fill that hole with a motor in another video, but we at least will get this intake on there, let it dry, let it set up for 24 hours so it doesn't leak, and I'll show you guys what I do. So I'm just going to consume a man drink for right now. Whew. Whew. It's pretty much a monster truck you just pour into your face right there. Whew. So for you guys, it'll be instantaneous, but for me, it'll be 24 hours, so I'll be wearing different clothes next time you see me. Till then. And we are back. Have the new gaskets. I've already ported them out. Let's go ahead and take a look up close real quick. So as you can see, These are imported to match the ports perfectly. So now we just gotta put that intake on there. I'll take another peek and make sure everything is looking hunky-dory before we add RTV and permanently seal this guy up. Better do a better job than that one. The RTV's on there. Oh, baby. All right. Well, it's not NASCAR perfect, but it's TPV perfect. Let me grab the phone and peer in there, take some video so you guys can see it. That one looks pretty darn good. So does that one. So does that one. And so does that one. Step 2 coming up. First thing to make sure it's good and clean. So I got a little bit of brake clean on here. Get rid of all the residual oils that may be sitting on there. I always put the oil sending adapter right here for your gauge in the back first, because if not, it'll like to sploosh over and it's hard getting it out or getting it in. So always do this guy first before you put your intake on. So first, I always use the right stuff. This seems to set up and seal better. So I'm going to put a little bit of RTV right here, where the water patches ways go. A little bit in the middle. Right here. Right here. And right here. I always say I'm going to wear gloves when I do this, but I never think to do it. I got this one labeled D for a driver side. Go ahead and put her up there. All right, I'm definitely not the best at putting on the China walls. I do my best. But basically you want to just overlap this area pretty good on both these corners. Same thing back here. And get your RTV tall enough that when the intake goes down on there, it kind of squishes it out. So that's what I'm going to attempt to do. Like I said, I'm not the best at this, but I try. All right, so here we go. Hopefully I didn't do this too far that way, but I'm pretty sure the intake sits pretty far that direction. I'd rather kind of squish out this way than in that way. This one I kind of pushed it back. Like I said, I'm not the best at doing RTV on these intakes. They never seem to leak for me, so I've been fortunate on that. So we're going, and also I put there's a very thin layer on the intake before I put it down. I think it kind of just helps them both meet together just a little better. So here comes the butt pucker moment where you try to drop that directly on there without moving it around. You want to just drop it directly on there, and you don't want to have to push it any direction too much, because then you just screw up your RTV and you got to wipe it all off and do it again. So hopefully I can get it right the first drop and we'll be good. I felt pretty good about that, guys. I think we're there. All right, so before you commit to putting any bolts in there, you want to just look at it. Looks like everything, I don't see any light through there. It looks like it's squished down pretty good right here. Let's look at the back. And the back looks like it's squished down pretty darn good. And you see right here, this is what I say. You want to put this in before your intake goes on, because for number one, it's hard to get a tool on there to tighten it down. I believe that's a 7/16. So you tighten it down before, and also you can see the stuff back here starts to squish back, and it can go inside the hole, which can just cause you more work. So it's just better to put this guy in before the intake goes on. So now we got our intake bolts, and this is actually critical too. When you're putting these guys in, the intake can still shift around. And you don't want to tighten these up a whole bunch right at first. Just barely finger put them in. And of course, whenever I do a video, people got to mow their grass with loud lawnmowers. It is what it is. Hope you guys can hear me. I'm sure it's fine. But before you tighten these down, first of all, you don't want to tighten them all the way down. You want to just leave them nice and loose at first. Then you take your flashlight and you look inside your ports and you make sure everything is looking good. And we're pretty close. I think the whole intake needs to come this way on this side. So what I do, and I just barely push it on the side until I see it move. Barely push it. Then you take your flashlight and you peer in there good just to make sure everything is looking hunky-dory. And we're pretty darn close. I still think it needs to come over just a tad that way. So let me do it again. I'm just gonna push with my finger this time. And it's this side, so the whole thing needs to kind of go like this just a little bit. So I'm just gonna push it ever so slightly. Take my flashlight and I'll look in there again. And now, oh yeah, and now we're looking good. It's looking like where I want it to be. And it does appear that, let me see one more thing real quick. I think the whole thing can go over this way a little more too. So I'm just gonna take my screwdriver right here in this little corner. I'm gonna push it that way, just a tad, finagle it. See that? The whole thing moved just a little bit over. And oh man, baby, now we are looking good. When you're tightening this down, just barely do it. From the middle out is the way I usually do it. And I'm going to barely tighten these guys down. And as I tighten it down, I'm going to make sure it doesn't shift on me, because believe you me, it will try to shift. Looks like it shifts a little bit that way, just a tad bit. Okay, so all the intake bolts are just barely tight, and you can see we have a good bit of squoosh that's coming out. So what I'm going to do, this guy right now is going to let it sit for about 2 hours, and then I'm going to tighten it down a little more. And then after that, I'm going to put it up, and then tomorrow, the next day, I'm going to completely tighten it down. And that way, those gaskets in there and everything should set up really nice, has some force on the RTV after it's dried, and it shouldn't leak at all once it's running. And of course, I'm going to put the cover over it because I'm OCD about anything falling into a brand new assembled motor and possibly screwing it up. So 2 hours from now, we're going to tighten down a little more. So we'll return in 2 hours. All right, so it has been roughly 2 hours. I'm going to torque it down just a little more, not super tight. Well, all right, so that's pretty much my process. They're snug. I haven't given them any like uggas yet. So tomorrow I'll give it the torque down completely, and it should be set. Well, that's how I do my intakes. They don't leak. The LT1 over there hasn't leaked. When this was in here before I pulled it out, it didn't leak. So hopefully it won't leak again. Don't forget to subscribe, guys. Thanks for watching, and peace.